Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some really interesting stuff today.
Yeah, it should be a good one.
Definitely. We're looking at banking.
The world of banking,
Yeah, and
specifically risk management.
risk management,
Yeah,
which, always a hot topic,
always.
especially these days.
Oh, yeah.
But we're focusing in on the chief risk officer, the CRO.
Right, the CRO.
Big job.
Huge job, yeah.
And looking at these sources you sent over, I'm fascinated by this question. Is the traditional model of just having one CRO and they're responsible for every single risk you can imagine, from cyber attacks to climate change, is that model even, viable anymore?
That's a great question, yeah.
Especially with these new, stricter regulations for CROs like we're seeing in the UAE, it makes you wonder if this is the beginning of a global trend.
Well, I think one of the most interesting things to think about first is how the idea of risk itself has changed for banks.
Oh, absolutely.
It used to be all about credit risk and making sure you're following regulation.
Right, the classic stuff.
Exactly, the stuff everyone thinks about. But then, boom, the digital age hits.
And everything changes.
Cybersecurity threats, data breaches, it's all on the table now. And then you layer on top of that environmental concerns and operational disruptions.
Like supply chain issues, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And then you can't forget conduct issues that could really hurt a bank's reputation. It's mind-boggling how much has changed.
It really is. I mean, going through these sources, it felt a little overwhelming. Like, imagine being the CRO. It's like they need a crystal ball these days
Right.
to manage all that, to try and anticipate and mitigate risks across such a broad, complex landscape. Is that even possible for one person?
Yeah, it's a massive question that's being debated right now. And I think to really understand why it's such a big deal, we have to look at the potential consequences.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because we're talking about a global system here. If there's a big oversight in any one area, it can set off a domino effect. I mean, look back at the 2008 financial crisis. Risk management failures were a huge factor.
Right.
And that's why we're seeing regulators, like in the UAE, step up their game with these stricter requirements for CROs. They're starting to recognize the massive responsibility CROs have and the potential impact those decisions have on the entire financial system.
Okay, so you're saying these stricter regulations in the UAE, they're like a sign of things to come. Could you break down exactly what they're doing differently over there?
Oh, absolutely. So the UAE Central Bank, they recently put out these enhanced regulations that really put a spotlight on the qualifications and experience of CROs and on their reporting responsibilities.
All right.
CROs are facing way tougher accountability standards now. There's more board oversight, and the framework for identifying and assessing risk is a lot more rigorous. Basically, they're acknowledging that the scope of risks is expanding and they need stronger risk management practices to keep up. It's a big move, and it could easily signal similar changes happening globally.
So you're saying this shift towards stricter regulations, does that mean that maybe this whole idea of relying on a single CRO, like this one-person show model, is it reaching its limit?
It's certainly a point a lot of experts are raising. The concern is that when you put that much responsibility on one person's shoulders, even the most capable person in the world, you increase the chances of oversights and systemic vulnerabilities. And it's not about pointing fingers, it's about recognizing human limitations.
Right, it's not about blaming one person.
Exactly. Imagine it's like asking one pilot to fly a jumbo jet, manage air traffic control, and navigate a crazy storm all at the same time.
Oh, okay, I see the problem with that.
Sure.
So if this traditional model is showing some cracks, what other options are people looking at? What are the alternatives?
Well, this is where things get really exciting. One approach that's getting a lot of attention is decentralized risk management. The basic idea is to spread the responsibility around, create specialized teams and officers.
So you mean like having different people focusing on specific areas of risk?
Exactly. You could have a chief cybersecurity officer who's laser focused on digital threats, a chief sustainability officer for environmental and social risks, and so on. That way, you have real experts digging deep into their specific areas, potentially creating a more robust defense against these increasingly complex threats.
So instead of one superhero, it's more like assembling a whole league of experts.
Exactly. Each expert can dedicate all their attention and expertise to their specific domain. Of course, it's not a perfect solution. Supporters of the traditional model argue that having a single CRO helps maintain a unified vision and ensures consistency across the entire institution. There are trade-offs with any model, and that's what makes this such a fascinating discussion.
It really does. So for those of us listening who aren't banking experts, How do we make sense of all this? We're hearing that the risk landscape is changing, becoming more complex, and that the traditional CRO model might be struggling. What should we, as customers or investors, think about when we're dealing with financial institutions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It comes down to each individual's level of confidence. How confident are you in your bank's ability to manage these evolving risks? Or are they being transparent about their risk management practices? Do they seem committed to adapting and innovating in this changing landscape? These are the questions worth asking.
Definitely food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
I think we often put a lot of trust in our financial institutions, but it's important to be aware of these challenges and how they might impact the stability of the whole system.
Right. And I think a final thought for our listeners is, what if the future of risk management isn't about finding that superhero CRO? What if it's about building a culture of collaboration, a system where you have diverse perspectives, specialized expertise, and continuous learning all coming together? That's what it takes to build truly resilient financial institutions.
It's a great image to end on. It seems like this conversation about risk management is far from over, and we're going to have to keep adapting as the world changes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. It's been really insightful.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.